Hey there, viewers. Here's a question for you. If no one was watching, what would you do behind closed doors? Drop your thoughts in the comments because shocking footage just leaked of what Diddy was caught doing inside his prison cell. And trust me, what's on that tape will leave you absolutely speechless. This is one reveal you need to see. Let's dive in. Chapter 1. Something isn't right. Let me tell you something. M.D. See, Brooklyn ain't like any other prison. People on the outside think it's just a holding place, a spot where they keep you before trial. But on the inside, it's a pressure cooker. Every second feels like a test of who you are and what you're made of. The walls hum with tension. The air is thick, thicker than the steel bars that keep us locked in. You learn real quick to mind your business if you want to make it through your bid. Most days, nothing changes. It's the same schedule, same faces, same heavy weight pressing down on you. But every once in a while, something shifts, something you can't quite explain. And that's how it was with Diddy. I've been in here long enough to know when something's off. And that day, something was off. See, when Diddy first came through those doors, it was like the whole place adjusted itself around him. I don't know how else to describe it. He didn't act like a regular inmate, didn't walk with his head down like the rest of us. Nah, he held his chin high, like he was still sitting on a throne, like 1600 was just another stop in his empire. And the craziest part? He made you believe it. The guards treated him different. The inmates did too. Some whispered that he still had people working for him on the outside, that nothing happened in here without his say-so. Others said he was just biding his time, waiting for the right moment to pull strings and walk out like he owned the place. I didn't know what to believe, but I knew better than to get too close. Except that day, I couldn't ignore it. I shared a tier with him, 2 cells down, close enough to see his door every time I walked past. And usually, he had this calmness about him, like none of it mattered. But that morning, something was different. He wasn't calm. He was restless. I first noticed it during the morning count. While the rest of us lined up against our cell doors, waiting for the COs to do their rounds, Diddy was already pacing. Back and forth, back and forth. Slow, deliberate steps. But something about it felt wrong. When the CO stopped at his door, he barely looked up. Just nodded once, like he wanted the whole process over with. And after that, he went right back to pacing. I tried to shake it off. Maybe he was just having a bad day. But that feeling, that heaviness, didn't go away. By lunch, it got worse. I caught a glimpse of him in the chow hall sitting at the corner table. Usually he had a couple of guys posted up around him trying to get in his good graces. But not that day. That day he was alone. He wasn't eating either, just pushing his food around with his fork like his mind was somewhere else. And his eyes? Man, his eyes were cold. Colder than usual. Like he was seeing something none of us could. I should have left it alone. I knew better than to watch him too close. But I couldn't help it. Something was wrong. I felt it. By the time we locked in for the evening, the tension was crawling up my spine. I lay on my bunk, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what the hell was going on. And then, it happened. It was late, hours after lights out. The block was quiet, except for the occasional shuffle of boots as the night guard did his rounds. Most of the guys were asleep, but not me, and not Diddy. At first, it was subtle. A faint sound coming from his cell, too quiet for anyone else to notice. But I heard it, a low, rhythmic tapping, like he was knocking on something. Tap, tap, tap. I tried to ignore it, I figured maybe he was just restless. But then, the sound changed. It got faster, desperate. And then, silence. I sat up, heart pounding in my chest. Whatever he was doing, it wasn't normal. And something deep in my gut told me I needed to see it. I slid off my bunk and crept toward the bars. From my angle, I could barely make out the edge of his cell. I couldn't see what he was doing, but I could hear it, shuffling sounds, low whispers. And then, something else. A light. A faint flickering light coming from his cell. Too dim to be the overheads. It didn't make sense. In 1600, you don't get access to things like that. Nothing that could cause a fire. Nothing that could be used as a weapon. But there it was, glowing in the darkness. I pressed myself against the cold steel bars, straining to see more. But what I saw next, it made my blood run cold. Diddy was kneeling on the floor, right there in the middle of his cell, and in front of him was something I couldn't explain. At first, I thought it was paper, torn out pages scattered around him. But the longer I looked, the more I realized it wasn't paper. It was pictures, dozens of them. Faces I didn't recognize, faces that looked too young to be in here. Some of them were crossed out. Others had strange markings scribbled over them, symbols I couldn't understand. And Diddy? He was talking. Not loud, just under his breath, like he was reciting something, over and over again. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. Something wasn't right. Something dark. And just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, he looked up. I swear, for a second, it felt like he was staring right at me, like he knew I was watching. And the expression on his face? It wasn't fear. It wasn't anger. It was control. I backed away from the bars, heart pounding in my chest. I didn't want to know what he was doing. Whatever it wasn't normal. And the worst part? I knew. This was just the beginning. Chapter 2. I don't care where you go. I woke up the next morning feeling like I barely slept. My body might have been resting, but my mind, it was racing. I couldn't shake the image of Diddy kneeling on the floor of his cell, those strange pictures scattered around him, and the way he looked at me, like he knew I was watching. The thing is, when you're locked up, you learn to ignore stuff that doesn't concern you. It's a survival thing. Ask too many questions, stick your nose where it doesn't belong. You won't last long. But Diddy? He wasn't the kind of man you could ignore. When the morning bell rang and the COs started their rounds, I expected Diddy to act like nothing happened. That's how it usually works in here. What goes down at night stays there. But when I stepped out of my cell for morning count, I could tell something wasn't right. He was already up, standing by his cell door, arms crossed, that same cold look on his face. But this time, there was something else in his eyes. Something harder. I tried not to look too long, but as I shuffled past him in line, I felt his gaze lock on me, sharp and heavy, like he was daring me to say something. I didn't. I kept my head down and followed the rest of the block to the chow hall. But I should have known he wasn't going to let it go. The conversation that changed everything. It was after breakfast when it happened. I was back in my cell, minding my business, trying to convince myself that last night was nothing but a weird dream, when I heard his voice. Yo. Just that. One word. Quiet, but it cut through the noise like a blade. I turned my head slowly. Diddy was leaning against the wall outside my cell, arms still crossed, like he had all the time in the world. You see something last night? His tone was casual, but his eyes, dead serious. I felt my throat tighten. Nah, man, couldn't sleep, that's all. He didn't blink, just stood there, watching me, measuring me. And then he smiled. But it wasn't a friendly smile. It was cold, calculating. Good, he said, nodding. Keep it that way. I should have left it at that. I wanted to leave it at that. But something about his tone, it made my skin crawl. So against my better judgment, I asked, what was all that about? For a moment, I thought he wasn't going to answer. But then, he stepped closer. So close I could smell his cologne, a sharp, expensive scent that didn't belong in a place like this. I don't like company at night, he said, his voice dropping low. And I definitely don't like eyes on me when I'm handling business. I swallowed hard. It's against the rules. I can't just leave the cell overnight. That's when it happened. His whole expression changed, like a switch flipped inside him. I don't care about no damn rules. His voice was harder now, colder. You think they apply to me? You think they control what I do? I froze, and then he laughed, low and quiet, like he found the whole thing amusing. You don't get it, do you? He shook his head. You're still playing by their game? But me? His smile faded, replaced by something darker. I am the game. I should have stayed quiet. I should have let it go. But my curiosity, that stupid curiosity, got the better of me. Why? The word slipped out before I could stop it. Why don't you want anyone in the cell at night? For a second, I thought he was going to snap. His jaw clenched, and that cold light in his eyes burned brighter. But instead, he leaned in closer. You ask too many questions, he murmured. And questions? They get people hurt. I couldn't breathe. My whole body locked up, frozen in place. Then he stepped back. Just like that, the tension vanished, like he had flipped the switch off again. I'm giving you one chance, he said quietly. Find somewhere else to sleep tonight. I don't care where you go. Just don't be in my cell after lights out. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him that wasn't how things worked. But the words wouldn't come out. And before I could pull myself together, he turned and walked away, like the conversation never even happened. The fear sets in. The rest of the day, I couldn't shake that feeling. My stomach was twisted in knots. I tried telling myself it wasn't a big deal, that he was just flexing like he always did. But deep down, I knew better. Something about that night had changed him, and whatever it was, it scared me. I tried to play it cool during the afternoon wreck. Hung back in the yard, kept my distance, but every time I glanced his way, I could feel his eyes on me, like he was waiting to see what I'd do next. When the final bell rang for lock-in, I thought about going to the COs, telling them I needed a new cell. But snitching? That wasn't an option, not in here. So instead, I did nothing. And that's when the real fear kicked in. Because the truth is, I didn't know what would happen if I stayed. But I knew, without a doubt, that something was going to happen. And when lights out came, I had a decision to make. Stay in that cell and risk whatever it was he didn't want me to see, or walk away and pray I didn't regret it later. And trust me, what happened next? I still regret it. Chapter 3. Where is Diddy? The next morning I woke up in a different cell, one I managed to crash in for the night. My body felt heavy, like I barely slept, and my mind. It was still stuck on everything Diddy said the day before. I don't care where you go, just don't be in my cell after lights out. His words echoed in my head, over and over again. I didn't know what was more disturbing, the fact that he wanted me gone, or the way he said it, like he was protecting something, or hiding something. Either way, it wasn't normal, even for a place like MDC. And when I stepped back onto the tier that morning, things got even weirder. Because for the first time since I'd been sharing that cell with him, Diddy was gone. Something feels off. At first, I figured maybe he was in the shower or talking to one of the COs. But as I walked toward our cell, I noticed the door was slightly open, something that never happened in this place unless you were inside or already out. I peeked in. Empty. His bed, pristine, untouched. Not a single wrinkle in the sheets. Diddy was always there in the mornings, always up before everyone else, always sitting on that lower bunk with his back straight, like he owned the whole damn block. But today, nothing. I stood there for a moment, trying to piece things together, but nothing about it made sense. Diddy never missed count, never missed chow. Hell, he barely even missed a chance to remind everyone he was still in charge. But today, it was like he vanished. And for the first time since I got locked up, I felt something crawling under my skin. A wrongness I couldn't shake. No sign of Diddy. By the time the COs called for breakfast, I had convinced myself I was overthinking it. Maybe he had a private meeting. Maybe he was handling legal stuff. A dude like Diddy? He had connections. Could have been anything. But when I got to the chow hall, he wasn't there. I scanned every table, starting with the spot he always claimed by the back wall. Empty, not a sign of him. I grabbed my tray, trying to act normal as I sat down with a few guys I knew. But the whole time my mind was racing. Diddy didn't miss meals. If anything, he treated the chow hall like his personal stage, a place to remind people who he was. And yet, as the minutes ticked by, the seat next to the wall stayed empty. I tried to brush it off, but the feeling wouldn't let go. Something wasn't right. And by the time lunch rolled around, I was done pretending otherwise. Still no sign of him, no words, no explanations, just gone. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers, searching for clues. I spent the rest of the afternoon asking questions, quietly. You don't just walk around MDC asking about a guy like Diddy unless you want trouble. But I had to know. I started with the guys in my block, the ones who usually moved close to him. They knew everything that happened around here. If anyone had seen him, it was them. But when I asked, all I got was blank stares and head shakes. One dude, a skinny guy named Marcus, squinted at me like I was crazy. "Man, I ain't seen him since yesterday," he said, leaning back against the wall. "Ain't like him to disappear, though." "You sure he didn't say nothing?" I wanted to tell him about the night before, the strange way Diddy kicked me out of our cell. But I held back. Something about this felt bigger. And the more people I asked, the weirder it got. The kitchen crew, guys who knew every movement inside the block, hadn't seen him come through. The yard boys, who always kept their eyes on the high-profile inmates, had no clue where he was. Even the COs, silent, not a word. It was like the man just vanished. And the longer he stayed missing, the more the air around me started to shift. Because when a guy with Diddy's power goes missing, it means something. The rumors start. By the time dinner rolled around, the rumors had already started spreading. Some guys said he'd been pulled out for a secret meeting with the feds. Others swore he was in the hole, solitary confinement, for something nobody was allowed to talk about. But there was one rumor, one that caught my attention, that wouldn't leave my mind. A guy from the upper block told me he heard strange noises coming from the medical wing the night before. Said he swore he heard a man's voice, angry, loud, but the COs shut it down fast. And when I asked him who he thought it was, he just shrugged. But the look in his eyes, it told me everything. He thought it was Diddy, a heavy feeling. I tried to let it go, tried to tell myself it was none of my business. But that heavy feeling, the one I felt the night he told me to leave the cell, it wasn't going away. And the worst part? I couldn't shake the idea that whatever had happened the night before was only the beginning. When lights out came that night, I lay awake in the borrowed cell, eyes wide open, heart pounding. I wanted to believe he was coming back, that tomorrow would be normal again. But deep down, I knew better. Because when you're locked up, when you're surrounded by secrets and lies, there's one thing you learn fast. When a man like Diddy disappears, he's either pulling strings you can't see, or something's gone horribly, horribly wrong. And me? I was about to find out which one. Chapter 4. Alone in the dark. Dinner time. The sound of clattering trays and the low murmur of voices filled the air. Normally, I'd grab my food, sit down and eat without thinking twice. But tonight, I barely touched my tray. My stomach twisted itself into knots, making it impossible to swallow even a bite. My hands were clammy. My heart wouldn't stop pounding in my chest. Because no matter how much I tried to push his words out of my mind, they wouldn't leave. I don't care where you go, just don't be in my cell after lights out. I didn't know why he said it, or what he was planning, but it didn't sit right. Nothing about this situation was normal. And the fact that he was still missing all day, that made it worse. I glanced toward the far end of the chow hall, half expecting to see him slide in late like he owned the place. But his seat, the one no one else dared to touch, was still empty. I poked at the dry, cold mash on my plate, forcing myself to act normal. But my thoughts wouldn't settle. Where was he? Why did he want me gone from our cell? And what would happen if I didn't listen? Those questions buzzed around my head like hornets. Each one stung a little worse than the last. And as the COs started barking orders for cleanup, that heavy feeling in my gut grew sharper. Because I knew what was coming. Lights out, and I had no idea where to go. When the building falls silent, the sound of boots echoed through the hall as the COs began lining everyone up. One by one, inmates shuffled toward their cells, some joking around, others moving quietly, like they always did before nightfall. I tried to blend in, keep my head down, but deep inside, I was panicking, because I didn't have a cell to go back to. At least, not one I was allowed to be in. And the closer we got to lock-in, the worse the panic clawed at my chest. I slowed my steps, letting others move ahead of me. My eyes darted around the tier, searching for something, anything, that could give me a place to hide for the night. But there was nowhere. Every door slid shut with a heavy metallic thud, one by one. I was running out of time. By the time the last inmate disappeared behind a cell door, I was the only one left. The CO at the gate shot me a sharp look. "Move it!" he barked. I swallowed hard and gave a small nod, stepping toward the corridor like I knew where I was going. My legs felt shaky. My palms were damp. And the moment I turned the corner, I realized how alone I was. The noise, the chaos, the constant buzz of voices, gone. All that was left was the distant hum of the prison's fluorescent lights and the faint shuffle of COs making their final rounds. The air was thick and heavy, too still. I froze in the middle of the hallway, feeling trapped between my fear and my instinct to survive. I needed to find a place, fast, the search for safety. I moved quietly, my ears straining for the sound of approaching footsteps. I knew if the COs caught me wandering after lockdown, I'd be in the hole for sure. And if Diddy found out I disobeyed him, I didn't even want to think about that. I crept along the edge of the corridor, scanning the walls, the corners, any place I could squeeze into and stay hidden until morning. The janitor's closet? Locked. The empty storage unit? Sealed shut. Every option I thought of was a dead end. And with every passing second, the panic crept higher up my throat. I didn't know what Diddy was planning, but if he wanted me out of the cell that badly, it wasn't for nothing. Finally, at the far end of the corridor, I spotted a cluster of old, dusty supply crates stacked against the wall. It wasn't much, but it was the best shot I had. Without wasting another second, I slid behind the crates, curling myself into the tight space against the cold concrete. I pulled my knees up to my chest, heart pounding in my ears as I tried to disappear into the shadows. It was cramped, uncomfortable, but it was hidden. And for now, hidden was all I cared about. A long, cold night. The minutes dragged on. I tried to stay calm, tried to steady my breathing, but it wasn't easy. Every creak, every distant echo of footsteps made my nerves jump. I knew this place well enough to understand that the night belonged to those who had power. And whatever Diddy had planned, I didn't want to be around when it happened. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed softly, flickering once or twice. But everything else, silent, too silent. I pressed myself tighter against the wall, every muscle in my body tense. My mind wouldn't stop racing. Why had he been acting so strange? Why was I the one he wanted gone? And most importantly, what was he doing right now? I shivered against the cold concrete, my hands clenched into fists to keep them from shaking. I wasn't a coward. I'd been through tough situations before. But this was different, because no matter how much I tried to tell myself, it was nothing. I couldn't shake the feeling that something dark was brewing inside those walls. And for the first time since I'd been locked up, I wasn't sure I wanted to find out what it was. The unknown. I lost track of time. The hours blended together, an endless stretch of cold, quiet darkness. My legs ached from staying curled in the tight space, but I didn't dare move. At one point, I thought I heard something, a faint sound, almost like whispering. But when I strained my ears, the silence was deafening. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me. Or maybe it wasn't. The more I thought about it, the more I realized. Diddy's power wasn't just about money or influence. It wasn't just about fear. It was about control. And whatever he was controlling tonight, I had the sickening feeling it was bigger than anything I'd seen before. I shifted slightly, trying to stretch my legs without making a sound. My body was cold and sore, but I didn't care, because as long as I stayed hidden, I was safe. At least, I hoped so. And as the night stretched on, I made one silent promise to myself. When the sun came up, I was going to find out exactly what Diddy was hiding, no matter what it took. Chapter 5. A night I'll never forget. I don't know how long I had been tucked behind those dusty crates. Hours, maybe more. My legs were cramping. My back ached against the cold concrete wall, but I didn't dare move. Every nerve in my body was on edge, and no matter how much I tried to convince myself this was all in my head, I knew something was wrong. Diddy's words echoed over and over again in my mind. I don't care where you go, just don't be in my cell after lights out. What was he doing? Why didn't he want me there? And why was he so calm, too calm, when he said it? The air around me felt heavier, thicker, like the building itself was holding its breath. I tried to stay as still as possible, my ears tuned in to every distant sound. But for the most part, MDC was dead silent. Until it wasn't. Footsteps. Heavy, slow, getting closer. At first, I thought I imagined it, a trick of the mind in the dark. But then the sound grew louder, clearer, and it was coming right toward me. I froze. My heart slammed against my ribs, and I clenched my jaw to keep from breathing too loud. The footsteps stopped, right next to where I was hiding. I couldn't resist. I had to know who it was. Slowly, carefully, I tilted my head and peeked through the narrow gap between the crates. It was the guards. 3 of them. Not the regular patrol officers. No, these guys were different. Bigger, meaner. And they weren't just passing through. They were looking for someone. And by the way, they scanned the corridor with cold, calculating eyes. I knew it was me, caught in the shadows. I tried to shrink back further into the shadows, willing myself to disappear. But I wasn't invisible. One of the guards, a bald, thick-necked guy with a jagged scar across his cheek, turned his head sharply. Our eyes locked. My stomach dropped. "There you are," he muttered, stepping forward. I barely had time to react before his hand shot out, grabbing my arm with a grip so tight it made my fingers go numb. "Got yourself a little rat," one of the others sneered, moving closer. I tried to speak, to explain, but the words wouldn't come out. My mouth was dry, and my brain couldn't process what was happening fast enough. The bald guard yanked me out from behind the crates, dragging me into the middle of the corridor. My feet barely touched the ground. "You think you can just wander wherever you want?" His voice was low, threatening. I wasn't doing anything," I stammered. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear myself speak. "You think we don't know what's going on?" the 3rd guard said, stepping closer. "You're lucky it's us who found you and not someone else." Before I could respond, they shoved me forward, hard. My shoulder slammed against the cold wall, pain shooting up my arm. I was trapped, no escape. And deep down, I knew they weren't just doing this because I broke the rules. They were scared. The walk of fear. They didn't take me straight to my cell. That was the first red flag. Usually, if an inmate is caught after lights out, the guards march them right to their door, no questions asked. But tonight, they stopped about 10 feet away, their faces cold and expressionless. "Walk yourself the rest of the way," the bald one growled, releasing my arm. I hesitated. Something wasn't right. If this were any other inmate, they would have tossed him inside and slammed the door shut. But they weren't going near Diddy's cell. Even the guards were afraid of him. I swallowed hard and took a step forward, the sound of my footsteps echoing down the silent corridor. With each step closer to my cell, the knot in my stomach twisted tighter. My breath hitched in my throat, but I forced myself to move, because I didn't have a choice. I stopped at the door, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle. And that's when I saw him, the monster in the cell. Diddy was sitting on the floor, not on his bunk, not at the small table. The floor. His back was against the far wall, legs stretched out in front of him, his head tilted slightly downward. At first, I thought maybe he was asleep, but then he moved, slow, deliberate. His head turned toward me, and when our eyes met, I froze. His eyes, they were red, bloodshot and dark, like he hadn't slept in days. But there was something else, something I can't even explain, a look no normal human should have. I swallowed the lump in my throat and took a shaky step inside. "I told you," he said, his voice lower than usual, colder. I didn't have a choice," I stammered. "You had a choice," he said quietly, "and you made the wrong one." The room felt like it was closing in. I wanted to move, to back out, but my legs wouldn't work. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. And before I even realized what was happening, everything went black. The morning after, when I opened my eyes, I was lying on my bunk. I didn't remember falling asleep. Hell, I didn't even remember getting into bed. My whole